Abortion is once again proving a controversial issue on the campaign trail in New Brunswick. Specifically, it seems some Liberal candidates and the Liberal leader, Brian Gallant, are singing from different hymn books when it comes to how the party will vote on abortion if they form government. For more on this now, let's bring in our chief New Brunswick election correspondent, Bryn Weiss. Bryn, I guess we start with what Brian Gallant, the Liberal leader, has said. He's gone right out there and said earlier in the campaign, we're going to make sure that the laws are changed so that there's no barriers for women who want to have an abortion. And that's where it starts, and then we start the controversy rolling.
Yeah, that's exactly right, David. Earlier today, again, Liberal leader Brian Gallant was as clear as he could be that if the Liberals form the government after the September 22nd election, he is going to move swiftly to remove all barriers to abortion in New Brunswick. And he said again today that he's going to force Liberal MLAs to vote that way as well, regardless of what their personal beliefs might be on the issue. Let's listen to Brian Gallant from earlier today.
I've made it very clear this isn't about personal preference. There are people within our caucus and candidates, I'm sure, that fall on one side or the other of this issue and have their personal preference. But I've made it very clear that we are going to have to, as a party, follow the position of the party. And we've made it very clear that at the moment we do not believe the province of New Brunswick is ensuring a woman's right to choose. We will therefore make sure we find any barriers to that right, and we will eliminate them.
So, David, listening to Brian Gallant there, it seems clear as day what his intentions are when it comes to abortion in the province of New Brunswick. But it shouldn't come as a surprise that there are Liberal candidates who are pro-life. In fact, 5 of them repeatedly appear at March for Life rallies here in New Brunswick and are vocal pro-life supporters. They don't want to see those restrictions on abortion removed. And as Paige mentioned earlier, one of those candidates is Bill Fraser. He's a Liberal candidate up in Miramichi. And David, Paige actually caught up with Bill Fraser earlier today to ask him whether he was comfortable with the Liberal leader's position on abortion. And repeatedly, David, he said it's speculative as to whether the Liberal leader is going to whip that vote if they form the government. I don't think there's much speculation there, but here's what Bill Fraser had to say.
I'm not going to speculate on something that may or may not happen in the future. My views are very well known. I haven't changed my views in the past 8 years since I've been elected. I've always been leaning pro-life, but I also respect a women's right as well, and I also respect the law. And, you know, I agree with our leader when he states that we have to respect the law.
And Bill Fraser is right, David, when he says that Brian Gallant does allow his members to have personal views and beliefs on the issue of abortion. The difference seems to be whether or not they think the leader is going to whip that vote if they form government. And I want to read now, David, from an email Bill Fraser sent to the executive director of New Brunswick's Right for Life organization. This email was sent last week after Brian Gallant and Justin Trudeau had been campaigning together and talking about abortion. Here's the email. No such directive was given to me by Mr. Gallant or anyone else in our party. Besides myself, there are several other Liberal candidates offering this election who share my views and beliefs. In fact, as I indicated at the pro-life rally, Mr. Gallant said our caucus are free to have their own beliefs and views on this subject. The email goes on to say, I spoke with our leader's office and I am told Mr. Gallant's position has not changed from what he initially stated several weeks ago. I was further told that the story was skewed and it doesn't accurately reflect our leader's position. And the story he's talking about there, David, is actually a Sun News story from Chris Sims, who reported on Brian Gallant and Justin Trudeau's position on abortion when they were here. So it does appear that there are Liberal candidates telling prospective voters one thing, and the Liberal leader is out on the stump saying something quite different publicly. He's saying he's going to whip the vote. Liberal candidates are saying they're allowed to have their personal beliefs and whipping the vote might be speculative. Well, we actually caught up with the executive director, Peter Ryan, of New Brunswick's Right for Life organization, and he's not all that happy, David, because he wants these politicians to be as clear as they can be on this issue of abortion, something that Peter Ryan says is very important to a lot of people here in New Brunswick. Right now, I want to play a little bit from my chat with Peter Ryan earlier today in Fredericton.
It was quite something back in April when the Liberal Party changed their basic policy, which had been in place many years since Liberal Premier Frank McKenna. That's quite striking. The Liberal Party and the Conservative for years and years has been quite tolerant in terms of what individual members are allowed to advocate. And so you've had a mixture of views. Now it seems only one view is accepted within the Liberal Party.
The other issue, of course, for Peter Ryan is if the Liberals are successful and they win the election and they remove all barriers to abortion, Peter Ryan says it's only fair that the Liberals also talk about what that future would look like, whether we're talking about publicly funded abortions here in New Brunswick, publicly funded, of course, abortions on demand, as Peter Ryan calls them. So there's a lot of questions remaining here with this hot-button issue on the campaign trail. And luckily, David, with 2 more weeks to go, I'll bet you it's going to come up again. David?
And Bryn, you make a good point. This whole issue started a couple of months before the campaign when the Morgentaler Clinic, the only one in New Brunswick and Fredericton, said it was going to shut down, and it has shut down because it was running out of money. If you want to get an abortion in New Brunswick, here's the rules that have been in place since Frank McKenna was Premier. You have to get a doctor, 2 doctors, to sign off on your request. The Liberals now say that's the barrier, or that's one of them they want to remove, but they haven't been clear. Are there other barriers, as you mentioned, other publicly funded abortion clinics, opening new clinics? Who knows? Now, meanwhile, I know Dominic Carty and the NDP are probably all in favor of removing barriers to abortion access. David Alward, though, and the PCs, they just don't seem to be ready to sort of take this up and really take a stand one way or the other. Well, I'm not sure if that's fair to say, but they're really not going after Gallant on this issue.
Yeah, and I think that is fair, David. David Alward and the Conservatives are essentially supporting the status quo. They're saying they don't want to open this debate. The status quo that's been in place for 20 years has worked. And they also repeatedly say, look, this has been a cooperation between the Liberals and the Conservatives in this province, that you had the 2-doctor rule. They had to sign off that it was medically necessary. The abortion had to take place in a hospital. That's the status quo, and that's what David Alward supports. But when you do ask David Alward about the Liberal position, he does take a couple political shots, like he did today up in Miramichi in Bill Fraser's riding, when he said it's not the first time that Bill Fraser's gone rogue, and it's also not the first time that Liberal candidates have said one thing that's been different from the leader. Let's listen to David Alward from earlier today in Miramichi.
What is clear, and it's both with Justin Trudeau and also with Brian Gallant, he seems to trying to emulate Justin Trudeau. They're talking very centralized, very strong-armed approach. And it's been very clear that they will whip their people. And Bill Fraser can't have it both ways. You know, he says that he's pro-life and his leader is going to allow him to vote his conscience. That's pretty clear he's not.
And David, it should come as no surprise that, of course, abortion is a very controversial issue, and it's a difficult issue when you're talking about politics because it elicits very strong emotional responses on both sides, and that, of course, is going to happen amongst politicians as well as voters. So it's easy to understand why this is a tough issue, perhaps for the Liberals to wade their way through as they try to win the election on September 22nd. And as I mentioned, I'm not sure Peter Ryan and the others who oppose abortion here in this province are through yet asking the Liberal candidates where they stand, what they're going to do, and what New Brunswick future would look like under a Liberal government when it comes to abortion. David?
Bryn Weiss, thank you so much. Good report. That is a big issue. I think it's going to continue. We're going to see some debates, and I presume this may come up in the debates. Dominic Carty, I'm sure, wants to try and wedge the Liberals somehow on this.